Why is KASSADIN getting nerfed? Don't know. I am on break right now, couldn't tell you. Likely because the team believes him to be overpowered. KASSADIN is one of the usual suspects when it comes to characters who gain large amounts of power or lose large amounts of power when the item system changes. So that might be what's going on with him. How does Riot feel about me answering in-depth questions? Do they really care one way or the other? I'm sure there are restrictions on what you can talk about. So yes, how to say it? There are answers I could give that would get me fired. Like, as an example, if I was to give away like important company secrets, that would be bad. If I was to leak a lot of stuff, that would be bad. If I was to frame things in ways that like are overly like nasty towards my coworkers or something, like that can be bad, right? Like as someone who works at the company, it's really important that I generally don't come off as a terrible person, and I also, you know, can stream with respect to everybody working around me, because, you know, we all have different things we're working on. And so streaming while working at a company is definitely something that can be stressful at times, because you always have to make sure you're not saying mean things or super negative things. That said, Riot doesn't like overly censor what I'm saying, if that makes sense. So like, if we're doing something that I disagree with, right, like I can talk about that, right? Like if we're balancing the game in a certain way and I'm like, well, I don't know if I feel that's entirely correct, I can talk about that, right? If we take some strategy in a certain way that I don't perfectly agree with, like I can talk about things like that. It's not like I always have to be like, I think some people come on here and they're like, oh, are you just a Riot yes man? And it's like I'm probably not going to give you any like overly negative takes, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm bashing things like my coworkers are working on, right? But I can give you like real perspectives on things. How much you make roughly a year? I'm not going to tell you the exact number, but I can give you an idea. Okay, so if you go to our work site, they have a bunch of listings for designers. I am a principal game designer. That is my title. That's around equivalent to a... that can be equivalent to a senior manager depending on things. It can be equivalent to a principal UX designer. You know, there's like differences in all of these. For California-based companies, you can actually see what the pay bands are for something. So as an example, a principal UX designer makes between $196,000 and $275,000 a year, base salary. And then on top of that, you get incentive compensation. This is like some percentage of your salary every year is paid out in things like bonuses or long-term incentives. You get some amount of equity. You get 401k, you get medical, dental, vision, short and long-term disability, and you get free PTO. And so for a principal UX designer, it's between base salary is between about 200k to 275k, depending on, you know, how senior you are and that band, stuff like that. For a senior manager, base salary very similarly is 200k to about 275k, depending. Principal game designer is probably less than these. These are more specialized roles, so they would probably make more in terms of Riot's band than a principal game designer. Game designer 3, this is the position under me, so this would be like the equivalent of, say, like a senior game designer. The pay for a senior game designer is between 142,000 to 200,000 USD. And again, on top of that, there's all this extra stuff for incentive compensation, equity, stuff like that. So those are the things you can think of in regards to how much a design position might play at Riot, depending on the place it's in. But yeah, that's actually something you can do nowadays, is for any company that's based in like California or certain other states, they're actually by law required on their job listings to put down salary bands. So You can often see what the base salary is. Although another thing to know about in terms of tech companies is a lot of the more senior roles, you know, they still make pretty good salaries, but a lot of their compensation comes from non-salary things. So a lot of more senior roles at tech companies, they're going to be getting a lot of compensation in equity. They're going to be a lot of compensation in bonuses, things like that. And so the salary that you see for any senior role can often be, especially if you get very, very senior at a company, kind of like the tip of the iceberg of what that employee is actually being paid by the company. This isn't league related, but development related. I'm working on a game with my friends and motivation is dwindling for everyone. We were all excited for the game, you know. Any tips, suggestions? If motivation is dwindling, one of the things you could do is straight up just take a break. That is a great way to get motivation back, is, you know, take a break and come back to it in a week or two. You know, give people a vacation to go recharge themselves, recharge their creative batteries. You could schedule a team outing that to inspire yourselves. And so this is something like, you know, if you're working on, dumb example, if you're working on a game about the ocean, go to the aquarium together. Like, actually, right? Because then you'll go to the aquarium and you'll be like, oh my God, I love fish. Yo, here's all these fish that we could put in our ocean-based game with fish in it, right? Again, it's a silly example, but you can go together as a team to do something fun, and while you're doing that fun thing, perhaps it inspires you to like think about the game you're making together, which could do something. Those are some thoughts. I think one of the natural things just with making a thing, though, is like, you know, people can get tired of it. You know, not everybody's always going to be as energized. And especially if it's like it's a passion project, right? That's always potentially rough, where it's like, hey, one of the things that keeps me energized about making games is the fact that I'm paid, right? It's not that I don't like making games. I love my job. My job's incredible. But, you know, keeping the lights on really does help that energy on the days where I'm not feeling it. Whereas if, you know, it's a personal passion project with a bunch of friends, that requires a lot of self-starting, right? And self-starting can be a lot more difficult. I think there's a question you should always ask where it's like, maybe someone just doesn't want to be in the project anymore. Like if someone's just not putting the work in that needs to be done to get it done, which, you know, that's totally fine. Because again, it's a passion project. There's no strings tied there. Like, and if you want it still to be done, like maybe you ask like, hey, are you comfortable with me finding another person to work on this if you're not interested, right? Like maybe you have to have a real conversation about who still wants to make the game versus who doesn't.